Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on cultivating trust. My name is Megan Day, part of the governance leadership team at Diligent, of which iCompass is part of our family of brands. I'm really excited to talk in more detail with you all today about building trust and transparency in your communities. We'll be tackling what civic trust means, roadblocks you may face on the way there, transparency best practices, and how you can leverage technology to be more successful in your efforts to build and maintain this trust. So before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. To ask questions, just type them into the questions pane. I'll be getting to those towards the end of today's presentation, and are also happy to follow up with you directly afterwards as well. Everyone on today's webinar will also receive a copy via a web link, so feel free to share that with anyone on your team who might not be able to join us today. All right, so let's dive in. I actually thought it would be a good idea to level set with all of us when it comes to civic trust. What does that really mean? And up on your screen is a definition that really resonates with me. Civic trust is the extent to which citizens trust the government to do what is right, to do it honestly, to do it fairly, and to do it efficiently. I think that's something that is near and dear to everyone joining us today, and something we all want to see in our communities, and something we want to get right. But trust doesn't happen instantly, nor does it happen easily, I think, as you can all attest. And I will say, I think it really starts with civic engagement. But that can be a challenge when more often than not a substantial portion is disconnected from community decision makers. Or this may sound familiar, your instances of community engagement always stem from issues of distrust, that the government won't get it right, that's why I need to get involved. To quote Tom Miller, president of the National Research Center, most of the engagement that occurs around things that draw people out of their homes because they feel like they have to talk to their elected officials or something bad will happen to them. The potholes won't be repaired, or the firing range will be built near their backyard. And then if the decision doesn't support their perspective, they feel they haven't been heard. So how do you give a voice to your citizens, and how do you equip yourselves to listen effectively and to ensure your constituents feel like you're keeping promises? Tom and his team at the National Research Center back in 2016 did a big survey where they connected with 80,000 residents from over 100 communities. We have a link later on to the full survey that we'll share in our resources. Really interesting to take a look. They found that about half of all Americans give excellent or good ratings when it comes to trust. So, I mean, that absolutely crushes the current sentiment at the federal level. But truthfully, public trust actually does not score nearly as well as other characteristics of livability, such as the community as a place to live, raise children, visit, or retire. For those characteristics, at least 2 in 3 Americans gave excellent or good ratings. So public trust, it's not terrible, but it's just okay. And frankly, who really wants to be just okay? Pretty jarring too, but the longer a person lives in a community, the less trust he or she has in local government. This is regardless of age or income level, aka taxes paid. The same study found that residents who have lived in a community for over 20 years report much less trust in local government than those residents of the same age, same income level, who have been there between 6 to 10 years. Interestingly, research also shows that residents who live in a community longer compared to newer residents actually more often engage in community-centered activities. They expose themselves more to news about local goings-on, give higher ratings to local government services, and yet they trust local government less. So why is that, and what can you do about it? I think first and foremost, stop trying to solve for the problem, people. You don't have control over how long citizens have been living in your community. What you do have control over, however, is transparency. And we know for a fact that transparency increases trust. When local governments are transparent, public trust increases. And when trust is high, citizens are more engaged and feel empowered to take a greater degree of personal responsibility for their community. I'd love to run just a short poll of our audience. Let me bring this up here on screen for everyone. I'm curious, how transparent would you say your municipality is? Give me 1 second to get this launched. All right, I have the polling open. So how transparent is your municipality? Few options on your screen you can select. Not transparent or not really at all. Maybe it's mainly paper-based sharing of information. Maybe you'd say it's somewhat transparent. You put some information on your website, but not really everything. Or you're fully transparent. Everything is accessible online. Give this a few more seconds to see how folks are shaking out. All right, let's see what everyone says. Last call for responses. All right, let's close the polls here. And if I'm skilled enough, I should be able to share that with you guys. All right, big props to the 18% of you that are fully transparent and everything is accessible online. Maybe we should be talking about some best practices that you guys have there. Feel free to share those too in the questions about what's worked for your particular community. But 82%, not surprising. This is what we're hearing from many, many customers. Somewhat transparent. You have a website. Some stuff is up there, but not necessarily everything. So let's talk about, can everybody see my screen again? I think we should be good to go. Perfect. All right, so let's talk about maybe some things inside your organization that could prevent you from maintaining the transparency that you would like to achieve. We've heard from several local government leaders that there are often a few internal organizational and cultural factors that have hindered their success to build trust and transparency. So the first is pretending that social media is a myth. Almost every internet user can now be reached via social media. According to a study of 50,000 internet users aged 16 to 64, 98% said that they are visiting or using social media each month, and that number continues to grow year over year. A very high percentage of local governments, I think something like 85%, are now active on social. I would presume most of you are, but are you really using those platforms just as digital notice boards, not actually as engagement tools? In one study on brand response rates on social, government ranked third from the bottom for social media engagement. Only 8% of those surveyed had received a response, leaving the vast majority of citizens ignored by the government there to serve them. I mean, that's kind of astonishing. And I think that the playing field is changing quite a bit. And I wanted to share an experience from Cory Booker, who I'm sure you guys all know, former mayor of Newark, who spoke to the opportunity from social and highlights how it can play in bringing citizens closer to the government. He said, when we embraced social media, we took more control of the Newark narrative. We increased responsiveness towards residents. We drew more of our constituents in to participate in government. I think that's something we would all want to see. And social can be an incredibly powerful tool to drive that engagement. Use it to spark discussion and drive traffic to your website. Use surveys, similar tools like that, to gauge your community's thoughts on topics, projects, and upcoming decisions. And truthfully, whether you like it or not, social media is here to stay. So hand in hand with that is the notion that, that social is a passing fad. Relying on your council meetings as your sole communication method. Technology has progressed so much that citizens have much higher expectations around access to information, the type of information, the frequency of communication. I mean, think about your own experiences online with the brands that you love. They're communicating with you in a number of different channels and in a number of different mediums, and in a way that's fast, easy, and frictionless. I think I love to use Uber as a great example of, what they're doing is not revolutionary in terms of getting people from point A to point B, but they're removing the friction and making it transparent for everybody involved. So if you rely on your council meetings to be the only way citizens can get answers to their questions or find information, you're giving them more reasons to feel like you're not listening to them. By offering multiple engagement points, you also broaden the amount of people and types of people who will likely become involved. Parents with young kids, people who aren't physically able to attend the meeting, the younger generation who maybe just wants to watch it all on video. You can now easily use board management tools in a number of different useful ways, like to show which positions are open or coming up for election, or to have your citizens more easily submit FOI requests. The ease of accessibility increases trust. And you know what? It also frees up time on your end by making processes more self-serve. And the last thing here to talk about is really overarching all of this. You can't make it difficult for citizens to find out what's going on. And with technology, you can make it really, really easy. I sound like I'm beating a dead horse, but there's some really exciting technology out there that can help. Something like a transparency portal is a great example, where residents can see what's coming up in future discussions. You can include formal plans, video and audio from meeting minutes, vote results, all in one location. We want to share a couple of examples of great transparency at work. The first is Shawnee, Kansas. They post things like citizen surveys and work plans. You can meet your council virtually. You can apply right online for vacant positions. This really does help citizens directly understand the council's initiatives and projects to make this shared community a better place. Another is the city of Lawrence, who in particular has great information posted about their strategic plan that you as a citizen can dive into. This includes video, full documents around what they're doing to drive success. The city of Derby does a great job of tooting their own horn and highlighting their awards that they've won as a community. These tie into their strategic plans, keeps the community involved with ongoing events and programs, and who doesn't want to live in an award-winning town? And lastly, Newton, Kansas does a great job of allowing citizens to sign up for updates on anything from events, specific topics, upcoming meetings. Using something like these alerts allows your citizens to stay involved without having to be constantly connected or attending meetings in person. So I think foundational to all of those cities we just talked through are a couple of things. The first is an open data policy to ensure public data is released freely, proactively, accessibly online. This idea has quickly gained steam over the last couple of years. And I think there's now something like 140 open data policies at the state and local government level. So definitely something to make sure that your town is thinking about. The second, obviously, are taking those policies and putting best practices behind them to bring them to life. And lastly, technology solutions that make the information more accessible and to deliver services more efficiently. To delve a little bit deeper into this, there are 4 different technology components coming into play here that I think allow these cities to become more transparent and engage with residents. The first is around meeting and records management. A paperless system is really advantageous both to government staff and the public. In addition to help clerks automate meeting agendas, minutes, you can also automatically publish records for the public as an extension of your website. A wealth of information can also be available via robust search, allowing citizens the ability to find what they need without contacting a clerk. Technology can really put information at a citizen's fingertips in an instant, and it lessens the demand on you and your staff. Similarly beneficial is streaming government data. Again, provide your residents with up to the information as it relates to meetings and agendas. You can automatically refresh public information as a clerk works throughout the day. It does not get more transparent than that. Next are geographic information systems. The majority of data used by local governments is location-based. You need to keep track of addresses, streetlights, sewers, so on and so forth. Geographic information systems have an advantage over traditional databases when it comes to keeping track of things. It allows you to speed up decision-making because the information is displayed and arranged in a much more clear and concise way. And really, bottom line, it allows your residents much easier access to view permits, plan developments, aerial and satellite images, and so on. And lastly is streaming audio and video. We live in a real-time world. I'm sure if you have kids, you know we live in a YouTube world. Video is everything. But by streaming public meetings, you can energize and support the democratic process and reach a broader audience by allowing your residents the freedom to choose when and where they catch up on the decisions that matter most to them. Technology is here to help local government leaders achieve greater transparency, making it easier for the public to find and access information. In turn, I really believe this transparency helps build a trust-based relationship with your citizens, one that ensures more efficient delivery of services, contributes to economic growth, promotes cooperation, mutual support. I mean, that sounds pretty good to me, and I would hope that that sounds pretty good to you and your community as well. Before we open things up to Q&A, I want to share a few of the resources we mentioned in the presentation that you can find online. As I mentioned before, we'll also be making a copy of today's presentation available to you. We have these resources will be linked out in the presentation that we send to you afterwards. We have a great iCompass white paper on running a transparent government strategies, and I love the name of this, for a more joyful government. And then again, some of those additional research reports from the National Research Center. So I'd love to turn it over to you guys for questions. Feel free to shoot any and all towards us. And yes, lots of questions about slides. I just mentioned it, but we will definitely be sending those out in our follow-up email along with all of those resources as well. We did want to show you guys and we can include this in the follow-up, a really funny sketch from SNL not that long ago that replicates a city council meeting. I wonder how many of you guys have seen it, but if you haven't seen it, it probably resonates pretty strong and true with all of you, and certainly talks to that earlier sentiment about the longer you live in a community, the maybe the more gripes you have. I think I have a couple of questions coming in. Let's give this another second here. And while we wait for any last minute questions, I would just encourage you guys to reach out to book a meeting for an assessment. I think making strategic investments in technology solutions, you guys can achieve greater transparency in a much easier way. We are here to help and have many examples in addition to the 4 cities that we featured today who are doing a tremendous job at facilitating that transparency and cultivating trust. I don't see any more questions coming in, but again, we are very interested in your feedback. You'll be getting a quick follow-up survey to tell us what you thought of today's session. With that, again, please reach out if you are interested in seeing more about how iCompass can help you and your community. Thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.